I'm going to go over how to use edit mode in the 3D view editor. So assuming you went through the previous tutorial on the interface, when you start up Blender, it should look something like this. But before we start with edit mode, I'm going to make a couple more changes here to our interface and save them. So for one, we don't need a camera and a light source every time we start Blender, because we're using this primarily right now for 3D printing or hard surface modeling for 3D printing. So I'm going to select these three things in the scene by pressing B for box select, and then I'm going to just drag across to select everything. Okay, and then I'm going to press X to delete everything. Okay, also I want to make sure the 3D cursor is at the origin. So just like before, you'd have, go down to 3D cursor and you can zero these out to get it back to the origin. Or you can just hover over these values and press the backspace key and it puts it back to all zeros. All right, I am going to also add a default cube back. So Shift A for add, and then I'm going to add a cube, okay? Finally, I'm going to turn off the manipulator in the middle so that it's not in the way, because for the most part, I'm going to just use shortcut keys to transform the object. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. The way that you turn this off is by pressing Control Spacebar, okay? You can turn it back on if you want to by clicking the button up here for 3D manipulator widget. All right, so now I'm going to save these settings. So go down to Save Startup File, then click that to enter, and if I close this and reopen Blender, this is how it will look every time I start up the program. All right, the 3D view has a bunch of modes, but the one that we're actually going to cover is the edit mode. So there's a sculpt mode, the vertex paint, weight paint, texture paint, but for hard surface 3D modeling, for 3D printing, edit mode is what we'll mostly be using to make our primitive objects more complex. So to get to edit mode in the 3D view, you can just press tab, okay? And in the 3D view, you can actually edit the individual parts of the object. So all objects, all 3D meshes are made up of vertices, edges, and faces. When you go to edit mode, all of the points are selected. So what you can do is press A to unselect everything. Generally speaking, when you enter this mode, vertex selection is turned on, but you can switch between the type of selection by either clicking the buttons up here. So vertex selection is the first one. Second is edge selection, and the third is face selection. But what I will be doing, just because it's quicker, is using the hotkey to switch between. So to get the hotkey to switch between those different selection modes, you can press Control Tab, and you get a little menu, Control Tab, and you can switch to vertex selection, Control Tab, you can switch to edge selection, Control Tab, you can switch to face selection. Up here at the top in the info editor, you can see that this 3D mesh has 8 vertices, 12 edges, and 6 faces, as you would expect for a cube. You can see the individual vertices here. The vertices are basically the points. And if I switch over to vert selection, because I'm on face selection right now, I can select individual vertices or a vertex. In here, you can do the same transforms that you can do with the entire object. So I can select this vertex and I can say grab it. And once I grab it, it's connected to the cursor to change the shape. I can press escape to go back. I can grab it and say I want to grab it and go and move to the Z axis to move it straight up. Okay, so that's what I'll do. I can go to edge selection. So Control Tab, I'm going to go to edge selection. I'm going to select this edge. Okay, and I'm going to grab and I'm going to move it along the x-axis. So and I just now realized that I do not have my screencast keys on, so let me turn that on. This is a plugin specifically so you guys can see what keys I'm hitting. So let me turn that on so you can see that. Okay, all right. And I'm going to close this panel, the properties panel, as I'm working. Okay, so you saw me select this edge and I moved it around. I can select this face, this new face that we created by moving this vertex. So I'm going to do Control Tab, and then I'm going to go to face selection, and I'm going to select this face, and I am going to move this face. I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to move this face on the y-axis. So you can see already, we started with a simple cube, and now we have a much more complex shape just by being able to do a simple grab transformations that we could do on the entire shape. But, of course, we don't just have the grab transformation. We also have the scale transformation as well. So I can click on this face, so I can scale in the X direction, okay, to make this larger. You can see what that looks like. You move up, you can see what happened there, okay? Let's say I switch over to edge selection, and I select this edge, and I scale on the Z. It's a weird deformation, but you can see what that looks like, okay? And of course we can rotate as well, individual faces, vertices, or edges. So I'm gonna move over here. I'm gonna select this face, and Control Tab, I want face selection. I'm gonna select this face, and I'm going to rotate on the x-axis. You can see I'm folding the shape in on itself. So this doesn't look like anything that is recognizable to you, but I just wanted to show you that you can transform the shape into something very different, even when you start with something as simple as a cube inside of edit mode, okay? The other thing that you can do in edit mode that you cannot do outside of edit mode is you can add additional primitive shapes to an object. So if we do a Shift A and I add a UV sphere, and let's grab this and move it over here. When we leave edit mode by pressing Tab again, notice that in the outliner, we still just have our cube. But the way that Blender works, when you add shapes inside of edit mode, it adds it to the mesh. So cube is what it was when we first created it, but now this mesh or this shape or this object is actually all of this to Blender, okay? All right, so I'm going to go back to edit mode and let's make some changes to this sphere that is part of our object now. Zoom in on it. Actually, I'm going to go hit 1 to go to front perspective, and then I'm going to hit 5 to go to ortho. Move this over a little bit by pressing Shift and then the middle key. Okay. Right now, everything is selected of this sphere, but I'm going to press A to unselect everything. I'm going to zoom in a little bit and select an individual face. To face select, I'm going to zoom in a little. Let's say we select this face by right-clicking on our mouse. As you saw previously, we can scale this face. So I'm just going to scale it. You can see what happens here to the mesh, okay? So that's now part of the mesh. We scaled up that face. It's on the side of the sphere. I can, say, select this face. Right-click, and I can rotate it on the y-axis, let's say, to form this face, okay? So you can transform any part of a mesh any way you want to create more complex shapes. The next thing I'm going to show you is a couple tools that you can use that are only available in edit mode, and they go beyond the basic transform operations that are still available in object mode. So to do that, what I'm going to do is actually select everything by pressing A and then pressing A again. So the first A deselected that face and the second A selected everything. I'm going to delete everything. I'm going to say delete vertices. The delete menu here is a little bit more complex because you can delete the individual parts, but I'm going to delete the vertices, which will delete everything here. Okay, I'm going to add another cube, and I'm going to deselect it by pressing A. Okay, so we're back to the cube actually looking like a cube. Now, one of the tools that is available to you inside of edit mode is Extrude. There are a bunch of tools here on the toolbar. I'm going to go through a couple of them. So Extrude, I can say Control Tab, and select face select, and then I'm going to select this face at the top of the cube. Pressing E is extrude, and we can extrude up like this on the normals of this cube. Okay, say go over here, do another face select, over here, extrude out, over here, do another face select, extrude out. Okay, now this is looking a little bit like a T. Okay. So Extrude is another powerful tool that you can use to make complex changes to a mesh. And you can extrude in either direction. So I extruded, but I can select this face, and I can extrude, and I can extrude down as well, which would hollow out this. You can see that. And you can imagine that you might want to use it if you wanted to create a room or something that is hollowed out like a room. Okay, next I'm going to delete this mesh and show you one more tool. To do that, I'm going to actually select in a different way. So I'm going to go into X-ray mode. You can do that by pressing Z, which allows you to see through a mesh. And then I'm going to do a box select. So I'm going to press B and select all the way over. Okay, that makes sure that I select all the faces on both sides. If I didn't go in X-ray mode and I tried to use box select, it would only select the faces that we were looking at. Okay, now that I selected all the faces, I can go out of X-ray mode by pressing Z again. And now I can do X to delete, and I'm going to delete all the vertices again, which will delete the object. Do a Shift A to add another cube. Okay, it looks like our 3D cursor got put in the wrong place. So I'm going to Control Z to undo that, and I'm going to get the 3D cursor back. There's another way to do this, and this is probably the way that I'll do it going forward. That's the quicker way to do that. If you do a Shift S, you can get the snap menu, Shift S, and then you go to cursor to center, and you get this cursor to center. Okay, so now I'm going to create another cube, and now it'll be in the center. All right, so press A to deselect everything, and the next thing I'm going to show you is the loop cut tool. Loop cut allows you to create edges in your 3D geometry. So that is useful when you want to make things more complex, when you want to pull geometry out of simpler shapes. So I'll show you that now. You get the loop cut tool by pressing Control R, okay? And you can put a cut in the middle, horizontally, or vertically. And the way that you move your mouse, you can select which way you want it to be. make a loop cut here horizontally. And to verify that, I'm just going to left click to verify, and you can tell Blender where you want the cut to be. If you hit 0, it'll put it right in the middle, okay? And you click to confirm that. I am going to put another loop cut in here by doing Control R. This time I am going to put it here, enter, 0, okay? All right, so now that we have these extra edges on this cube, we can do more things than we could before with this cube because there are more faces. So if I press Control Tab to go to face select, and I click here, I have 4 faces here now instead of just the 1. So I can extrude this up, I can click on this face, and extrude this down. I can move over here and click on this face and say rotate it, and click on this face, and I can scale it down, okay? All right, so all of this might seem fairly useless because I'm making abstract objects, but let's use some of the things that we've learned to make something really quickly. So I'm going to select all of this again by pressing A to deselect my last thing and pressing A again to select everything. Now I am going to press X to delete, and I'm going to delete all the vertices. Okay, I don't think I moved my 3D cursor, but if I did, I'm going to do a Shift S and then cursor to center. And now I'm going to add another cube back. I'm going to go back to perspective view by pressing 5. Now I'm going to do a Control R for a loop cut, and I'm going to put a cut down the middle, and you can make more than one cut by moving the scroll wheel. So I'm going to do 2 cuts here by moving the scroll wheel once. Okay, now I'll press enter or click. So we have 2 cuts, and I want these to generally be in the middle, so I'm going to just press 0 to get them in the middle. Okay, and I'm going to rotate around, and I'm going to make another loop cut. Control R, and I want 2 here as well. I want these to be in the middle, so 0. So what we are going to do here is create a chair. So I'm going to select everything. I'm going to scale the entire cube on the Z-axis. So scale on Z to make the seat of a chair, okay? Now I am going to deselect everything, and I am going to do Control Tab to face select, and I'm going to select individual faces. So I'm going to select this face, and then shift and select this face, and then shift and select this face. That will be the back of our chair. Move this underneath, and I'm going to select this face, this face, this face, and this face. And those will be the legs of our chair. So you could have also gone to 7 for a top view and selected, and then press 9 to get the bottom view, and then selected those. Okay? All right, so let me get back by using the middle scroll wheel. Now, we could extrude if we press E, but they all extrude in the same direction. So I'm going to press Escape, so we don't do that. So over here in the toolbar, you can extrude individual, and extrude individual extrudes in the direction the face is facing, or that is also referred to as the normal. So if I click extrude individual, and then I move up, or move down rather, we have a chair. It's a really chunky chair, but it definitely looks like a chair. If you were to ask someone, they would say that is a chair, okay? Or that looks like a chair. And that's a very simple mesh, just by using 3 tools. Like, we scaled the cube, we used loop cuts, and then we extruded. So I was explaining this all along, so it took a lot longer than it would actually take you or anyone else to do the same task, but this is a simple example of how quickly you can transform a primitive object into something far more complex. And that's just the beginning of what you can do in edit mode in the 3D view, okay? All right, next we're actually going to create an object for 3D printing.